Professionalism of the care provider, putting your best brain to work. Hi, I'm Lauren Reynolds with At Home Nursing Care, and I hope this training gives you some insight into how our moods affect our brain, which affects our actions. Our brains are very powerful, affect our moods, our reasoning, our actions, and our reactions. And you may not be surprised to learn about when our brains are fully developed. In men, it happens in the late 20s, right around 28 years old. Men are fully functioning. And women, it happens in the early 20s, more like age 23. So that gives you some insight into why teenage behavior can seem so erratic or irrational. Literally, their brains are not fully developed yet. So the jobs of the brain are broken down by the location. You've got the frontal lobe, which is extremely important for problem solving, emotional traits, reasoning, speaking, voluntary motor activity. The temporal lobe is behavior, memory, hearing, understanding, and language. The brain stem is the first thing to be developed, and it's part of the main functions of our body: breathing, body temperature, digestion, alertness, and swallowing. So these are all the different parts of the brain, and they're very important, and they all affect different parts of being a human being. So I'm going to talk about the lizard brain versus the wise brain. And this is courtesy of Michel Zelnick. He is a business therapist with the Zelnick Group in San Diego. And I learned this from him, and it's made a great impression on me. So what is the lizard brain? Well, lizards are prehistoric creatures. They've been around forever. And when you think of the lizard brain, you want to think of the human condition of fight, flight, freeze, and faint. The lizard brain is really controlled by the environment. So it's a response to an outside threat to you. You're going to fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And these are some of the key words that give you an insight that maybe you're using your lizard brain. You're using your survival instinct, basically. Words like always. You always do this, or you never do this. So that's really unfair. You're being a jerk. You should, or you just don't get it. Those are all statements that are indicative of a lizard brain taking over. Then we have the walnut brain, which is our part of our brain that controls our wisdom. This is where we hear, we see, and we understand, and it's really controlled by ourself. So while the lizard is dictated by the environment, the wisdom is part of our own self-control. And ways to know that you're using your wisdom is when you take a pause. You say, whoa, wait a minute. Let's slow down. Or you want to learn about how the other person is interpreting something. What was your experience? What am I missing? Help me understand. This was my experience. So it's much more of a dialogue using the walnut brain, where it's just more of a fight using the lizard brain. So let's talk a little bit about brain development. Well, the brain develops in a specific sequence for humans, from the most basic parts to the most complex ones. So the brain stem begins developing first, followed by the cerebellum, the limbic system, and finally the cerebral cortex. So think of the lizard brain forming first. It's the most basic physical functions like breathing. The cerebral cortex, including the frontal lobe. The functioning of this lobe involves problem solving, planning, decision-making, judgment, controlling impulse, memory, and other higher order functions. That's the walnut. And remember, that cerebral cortex is only fully developing, firing on all cylinders for men in late 20s, for women in early 20s. So use your best brain. When you feel angry, your lizard brain takes over. It basically cuts off communication from the walnut part of your brain. Emotions interfere with connections to the higher functioning part of the brain. So that's why we've all heard that saying, never make an important decision when you are angry or upset. It's based upon this theory that you're not using your best brain when you feel anger or stress or frustration, or even when you feel really tired. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Anger shuts down the ability of perception, the capability to hear and empathize with others, and to see their point of view. Think about being defensive. When you automatically put up your defenses, it's really hard to listen to what the other person is actually saying, to consider their point of view. When someone is in lizard brain, it's like talking to a wall. Arguing is more emotional, and it's really pointless. So when two people are extremely upset and they're yelling at each other, it's actually a pointless argument because you're not going to get through to somebody when both lizards are out. It really takes some wisdom, slowing down, calming down to have real communication. Stress is another problem for the brain. High levels of cortisol released during stress can wear down the brain's ability to function properly. And according to several studies, chronic stress impairs brains in multiple ways. And that's chronic stress meaning like every single day, being in stressful situations. It doesn't mean feeling stressed when you have a deadline. While stress can shrink the prefrontal cortex, the walnut brain, it can increase the size of the amygdala, which is that lizard brain, which can make the brain more receptive to stress. So think of post-traumatic stress syndrome. When you've been experiencing so much of it, you may be triggered easier to stress. So let's talk about the stress response in our bodies. Nerve impulses are affected, hormones are affected, digestive issues happen, there's increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, and heavier breathing. Now, this is all meant to help us really survive a stressful situation. It's to help us fight, flight, freeze, or faint. So stress helps get our lizard ready for survival. Now think about clients that you may have that have dementia. Doctors diagnose dementia if 2 or more cognitive functions are significantly impaired. The cognitive functions that may be affected include memory, language skills, understanding of information, spatial skills, being able to consider distance accurately, judgment, and attention. The frontal lobe of the cerebral cortex, that walnut, is affected with Alzheimer's, with dementia. Connections are lost, cells die. With Alzheimer's specifically, it's believed that amyloid plaques and tangles cut off the neurotransmitters in the brain, and that leads to less brain function and less communication between cells. And so that affects everything, memory, language skills. And that's why sometimes talking to somebody with dementia feels like talking more to a lizard brain than a walnut brain. It's just simply what's happening in the disease process. So what brings out your lizard? And I want you to take a moment and think about it. Like, what are things that trigger you to just have that stress response, that anger response, that frustration response? Maybe it's being yelled at. Perhaps it's telemarketer calls on your mobile phone all the time. Maybe it's your kids being brats. Bills you have to pay that can be frustrating and cause anxiety. Car repairs when you really don't have enough money to pay for it. Fights with a spouse, loved one, family issues, deadlines, and money issues. These all might be triggers for you. And part of just understanding your lizard brain is just to know what affects you, what sets you off, so to speak. It doesn't mean you can avoid it entirely. It just means to know that's when you shouldn't be making permanent decisions. And maybe when you shouldn't be trying to solve complex problems is when your lizard is out. So your lizard brain helps you to survive, but your walnut brain helps you to thrive. So to put your best brain first, you need to first identify when your lizard brain is taking over. Notice the cues or the triggers that affect you. Maybe the cues and triggers that affect your client, your spouse, your children. Take a time out. Count to 10 before responding. We've all heard that growing up, like be sure you take a deep breath and count to 10 before you respond. And another thing is don't send that mean text or email. Sleep on it or wait 24 hours because in the heat of the moment, your lizard is out and you might say something that your more reasonable brain would have seen differently. Maybe you could have said it more softly. Maybe you could have said it without making an accusation. Maybe you could have said it giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. You just want to be mindful of that. There are ways to calm your brain. Breathe. Everybody take a deep breath in, deep breath out, calmly. It just has a nice calming effect. It gets more oxygen in your body. Take a moment to breathe deeply and encourage your agitated client to do this as well. If you're dealing with a client who really is just agitated about something, you could put a gentle healing touch on their arm and say, let's just take a moment to breathe. And just breathe in and breathe out, and that will calm your body and calm your brain. You can use a meditation app on your phone, a daily reminder to pause and just breathe. You can even just set a clock reminder, an alarm to go off every day at 3 o'clock, for example, to remind you to take a second, shut your eyes, and just breathe in, breathe out, and just feel your environment and calm yourself down. It's also really good to have empathy for whomever you're with, whether it's your coworker, your boss, your friend, your aunt, your niece. Is the other person in lizard mode? If they are, don't say, you're in lizard mode. That's just going to make them angry. Instead, just think about, let's all just calm down. Let's take a breather. Let's literally breathe, and let's talk this out. Get your beauty rest. So rest is important for brain function. So you should get 8 hours of rest daily if that's possible. Make important decisions after a good night's rest. And encourage a client to rest and recover too before they make final decisions. You can always say something like, I hear what you're saying. I understand how you're feeling right now. Why don't we sleep on it tonight and let's have this discussion again in the morning and see how we feel. Don't overwhelm yourself with multitasking all at once. You're not going to get 1,000 things done well in 20 minutes. So set reasonable goals for yourself and set reasonable goals for your client as well. Also, it's important to take a brain break. Our attention spans are actually pretty short. So when you're doing a high intensity concentration task, you should actually take a break every 50 minutes or so. You can change your body position, you can change your scenery, and actually just standing up if you've been sitting down at a computer, for example, or at a notebook, just simply standing up, stretching, breathing, looking around, that will get your brain ready to refocus again for another 50 minutes. Also, look at that gorgeous picture. Take a moment to view and appreciate nature. That's actually a wonderful brain break. Outside activities are great, such as taking a walk or a run or just sitting and watching the ocean waves. And there are studies that show that even when people can't get outside to experience nature, if they look at a pretty picture of nature, they feel a sense of calm come over them. So just looking at a picture is helpful. Other ways to calm your brain. Mindfulness, being aware of where you are, feeling the weight of your body on a chair or the weight of your body on your feet. Meditation is a great practice and calming for lots of people. Exercise or some sort of physical activity is great. Good nutrition is important. It helps feed the soul, feed the body, feed the brain. Something else is service to others. So in healthcare, we're in this wonderful opportunity to be mindful and to have relaxation in knowing that we are really here to help other people. And that helps us as well. It gives us a great inner purpose and inner peace. Avoid stressful situations if you can. So if listening to talk radio gets your blood pressure going, then avoid it. Turn off that TV program if it's making you feel too anxious to really enjoy it, and that gets your brain in the right mode. Practice gratitude for wisdom. Studies show that those who practice gratitude are happier and healthier. And those were studies by the University of California, Davis and the University of Pennsylvania. So how do you practice gratitude? It's actually very easy. Say thank you to people. Thank you to people who hold the door open for you. Thank you for the clerk who gives you the coffee. Thank you to your client. Thank you to your coworker. Saying thank you goes a long way. Also, count your blessings. Focus on your gifts in your life, the things that are going well, and forgive yourself for the things that you just don't do so well, because we're not all perfect. And so part of being mindful and getting your brain in that right functioning process every single day is to say, I'm not perfect, but look what I have. Look at how I help others. Look at how I come to work on time. Look at how I say thank you. People can count on me. Also, if you are inclined to pray, there are studies that show that praying is actually a great way to increase happiness and increase health and makes people feel calmer. So let's do a quick review of minding your mind. Remember who has the lizard brain. It's our most basic survival instinct. So that's the part of our brain that is first formed, and it's fight, flight, freeze, or faint. It controls those systems. The lizard is aroused by anger, fear, hunger, tiredness, or that feeling of being attacked. It does serve us all well, but it's not for best judgment or for reasoning. You're not going to make your best decisions or see things quite so clearly when you're in that lizard brain mode. The walnut brain is the frontal lobe, the higher thinking, reasoning, wisdom part of your brain. It's fully functioning in the late 20s for men, the early 20s for women. So we have to cut teenagers and kids some slack. The walnut works best when we're calm, and we need to take breaks in activity, around 50 minutes to recharge the walnut and improve our focus. So again, this training is really just showing you the psychology and physiology of our brains and thinking about how we can put our best brain forward in our daily work, in our daily experience, and how we can help others to do so as well. Let your best brain drive you, because a new mindset leads to new results. Thank you so much for participating in this training, and I hope it serves you well.